Hi, welcome back to my birdhouse build, a new birdhouse build, where I talk about how I actually sell different marketing techniques and other things that I use to make an income making birdhouses. Today I'm going to start with the back. You saw in part one that I put the basic structure together, the bottom, the front, the back, the roof, etc. And now I'm doing some more detailed work. This is a red colored, it's actually not red, it's kind of a rust color. Photography isn't picking it up that well, but I thought it might be a nice color complement to the red in the red cedar. I think I ended up getting away from that. I really wasn't that keen on it. Ended up covering it with a sketch, an etching actually on leather of a bear. That's at the end in part 3. I think you'll really dig that. But here I'm just messing around, and this is the process of an artist. You know, we try things out, and at this point I can always erase it. Here it's a watercolor pencil, so I'm kind of blending it and just to see what it looks like. And it's not unrecoverable. I can erase this if I want. In this case, I covered it, which you'll see in part 3. But I go in, and it just gives you an idea of different materials that you can use. I will put a link in the description below where I bought these watercolor pencils. And there's also brushes, I think, that I bought online too. I'm not sure this is one of them, but I'll find some decent brushes that are short and stubby and easy to work with and move the colored pencil around. Now I'm just dabbing it lightly on the plastic cap to not put a ton of water on the wood, just enough to spread the colored pencil. So now I flipped the birdhouse over and I'm thinking about a hood. Now that's a piece of spalted maple, and I thought that might be an interesting hood. But in the end, it really stuck out too far. It was about 1.5 inches wide, and I thought that's a recipe to get whacked off. So I decided to use a different material. Now this stuff is about 3/4 inch wide. That I can live with. So I cut this into shape, the length that I wanted, and I also made angle cuts to fit that shape. Don't ask me what the angle is because I do not know, but I just kind of sized it up, and it's not a 45, I can tell you that, as you'll see in a minute. I adjusted it accordingly, and I used the scroll saw here. It's a relatively aggressive blade, not too bad, but certainly aggressive enough to cut through this wood without too many problems. So I'm going to get an angle here that is not a 45. It's a little bit more splayed out on the sides. And I'm just lining everything up and cutting off the top parts to make it fit together nicely. So now I'm thinking I need a little contrast. So I'm adding early American stain with this Minwax pen that has stain in it. Instead of getting the can out and the brush and yada yada and a whole another mess and, you know, a lot of time to dry, this is relatively fast. And it might be a more expensive way to go, but I'd rather get things done and, you know, move on to the next part of the project. And this all blends in nicely. I don't stain the areas where I'm going to be gluing, so the back side is not stained. But the areas that show, that's the only part that I will stain. And then I will glue it to the face so it holds. The wood will hold to the wood nicely. So I have this bin here of small, thin pieces that I use for molding. You can see that one's square. But some of them are cut-offs from the tongues of, that's an edge, but some are cut-offs from the, can't see any here right now, but here, this is like the cut-off from a tongue. You can see it that way. This one. So they're already at angles, and they fit into a right angle place perfectly. So just by eye, I line it up in the center of the piece and try and balance both sides so they're about the same distance from the ground up. And then I add a little hot glue, this really good hot glue, which I'm putting a link in the description below where you can get some of that. And it's very durable for outside. It's a high-tack hot glue. I've talked about it a lot in the past, but you can find it in the description below. So when I have a little excess overflowing underneath or wherever using the hot glue, I take it off so it looks pretty seamless. And I just use that X-Acto blade, which I will also put a link for in the description below. So now I start to think about embellishments. In this case, a little piece of turquoise I'm going to put up in the top, in the peak. And I think it's a nice complement to the other colors of the wood. So I'm gluing that on again with hot glue. And this glue seems to be the best. I can kind of tuck a lot of the glue up inside the peak, so I can go a little heavy on it, and it holds really well. So now I'm just kind of thinking through. I was thinking about eyebrows, if I left this face, this owl face on here, and I don't know. I was just trying to guess at what I might do back here to embellish the backside. I do embellish both sides, and I really want to make this the kind of sculpture that you can see all the way around the entire piece and not just the face. So if you were to put it on a mantle, that probably wouldn't work. But if you put it on a table, and you could see both sides, and then, or put it on a spinner, they have some spinners. You could put it on something like that that just automatically spins around, and you could display it that way. So different ways to accept funds from customers is cash. You can use credit cards. I use a little thing called Square. It's a dongle that plugs into your phone. You download the app and set it up, and the funds will go directly into your bank account. Another one is Venmo. That's an app. You download that and set it up. And Zelle, which also deposits funds directly into your account. And lastly, PayPal. And during my morning walk, I found these little pine cone and walnut. I don't know what those things are, the hoods of the walnut itself and some other tree limbs. I thought that I would work to embellish this very organic birdhouse. So that's about what I'm going to do with the front. I'm also putting on some molding where the roof and the face of the birdhouse meet, just to clean it up a little bit. There are a couple of different ways that you can try to earn money. With me, yes, I sell my items, birdhouses, etc., but I also have a donation page through Patreon. And there's also a little button underneath the video here that says thanks. I think there's a $sign in front of it, but that allows you to also donate via YouTube also. And those things, they're basically for my viewers to help support me continuing to do this kind of work. And everything is greatly appreciated. I know that you've probably all heard the word starving artist. Well, it's a real thing. But I'm not starving. But God is good to me. But it's, you know, it doesn't hurt to have not just emotional support with comments that people say, which thank you so much. It means so much to me to get those comments. They're so kind, and I guess in some ways it's helped me see that there's hope in humanity, and these things that we hear are, well, they're not necessarily things that I see. But yes, there's different ways for me to earn a living, and anything is appreciated. But I especially love to hear people support me emotionally and through the comments. Thank you. So a little bit later in the video, I'll talk more about how to set things up for receiving funds when you're at a festival. So this time I'm adding red oak, I believe it's red oak, to that molding that will go between the face of the birdhouse and the roof. And I wanted to add something a little different than the early American that I had done earlier on the awning that goes over the hole, the entrance hole. So I used a red oak. I don't think it will compete too much with the red of the cedar, but I think if anything, once the urethane gets on that cedar on the face, that it's going to be a much closer match than it appears right now. When you put the urethane on, and I seal all of these birdhouses, when I put that on, it will darken. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't put urethane or anything that has a scent to it on the bird. The bird won't like it. Well, I can tell you right now, in my experience, the situation with any urethane is that it dries, and it is innocuous once it dries, so it's not a problem, not for us to eat off of a cutting board that has this on it, or a bird and a birdhouse. I'm sorry about that, but I'm probably going to get a lot of negative comments because I believe that, but it's just what I've experienced and researched over the years. And once it's dry, it's the fumes when you're putting it on and breathing it. That's me that's at risk with these things, not when it's dry and in a stable state. If you've ever worked with hot glue, you know that two things. It's really hot and you can seriously burn yourself, which I've talked about earlier. But the reason I continue to use is it dries very quickly and I can move on with my project. And for me as an artist, the thought process and the creativity flows, and stopping and starting and stopping and starting, that's just not a good place for me to be as an artist. So I like to start and try to do as much as I can in completion. I don't complete my projects all at once, but at least I don't get in the way of the flow. So now I'm putting on a urethane. It's a oil-based urethane, and it will darken, and it kind of adds like a orangey yellowish rich tone and value to the wood, especially if it's lighter wood. I don't have a problem with that. This seals really, really well, and that's my main concern, is that this birdhouse is sealed. If someone wants to use it outside, they shouldn't have to worry about it getting weathered. And again, might get some flack for this in the comments, but I don't think that a urethane will affect the birds. And I don't think it affects us either, unless you're breathing it in. Like right now, I'm outside, so it's relatively innocuous to me because I'm outside in an extremely well-ventilated area. So I always tell people that buy one of these things, if they're going to put it outside, they need to take it down every year in the winter or late fall, clean it, and dust off the outside and, clean the dirt off of it, and put another coat of urethane on it. Whether they use a spray urethane or they brush it on like I'm doing here, that's up to them. But it definitely should be treated nicely. It is wood, and it's outside, so it needs to be cared for and nurtured, like anything wood that sits outside. So the million-dollar question is, how do you sell? I guess there's an art to that. I'm sure that people who sell things, sales reps, they say there's an art to it. As for me, I will barter when someone comes up, but I have to take into consideration the cost of materials, the expense of using the tools, buying the tools, and also rent. When you go to these festivals, you sometimes have to pay upwards $200, $300 a day for your booth. And if it rains, you're out. So you have to take all of these things into consideration. I will barter with people, but not to the point where I take a hit that, it affects me greatly and I'm working for $5 an hour. Nobody wants to work for $5 an hour. So you have to weigh all of these things out. Think about that when you're selling. Now, some people say that your time as an artist doesn't matter. Well, I disagree with that, because when I think about my time, I think about the 12 years of education I have past my high school. And all of that's relevant in the time, my experience. I believe that that's a very relevant, in other words, you should be paid for that. So for me, it's important. I'm not a manufacturer. As an artist, your time is relevant. So really need to consider that when you're pricing your work. You can't outprice yourself. In other words, you can't put yourself in a market where you're just not going to sell anything. And then you really have to find specific markets, and that may take you far away from your home. Another thing you need to consider, how far do you want to drive to go to a festival and sell your work? So go ahead and price your work, but have a bottom line in mind. That, give yourself some wiggle room when you're pricing, and have a bottom line, a bottom price, that you can't go any lower than in mind. And that's what I do. And so I can work with people, and then they feel happy about that, and you're happy, and all's well. So if somebody comes up and they pick up the birdhouse and or they start touching it and asking you questions, they're definitely interested. So what I do is I let them look at it for a bit, and then I ask them if they have any questions. And if they do, I, of course, tell them. Sometimes I will offer up the kind of wood that I use, some of the techniques that I use, and to engage them and get them further interested in the art, because it is art. And I sometimes say that it is both art and sculpture as well as functional. Bottom line, you just need to pay attention to what people are saying and try to read them and perceive, if they're interested enough. Some people, they just appreciate what you make and can't afford it. And, it doesn't mean that they don't really like your work. They just can't afford it. So you're not in the right market. Now, if you sit at a festival and you don't sell anything, you shouldn't return to this place. And there's plenty of festivals that do not fit whatever it is you're making. You need to really, and you can't just go there and look at people, but you could ask other artists. You could see what they sell, see their price point. Now, this is before you even book a place. see their price point and ask them, how are you doing? I make these really ornate birdhouses. They're very artistic. Show them the picture. See what they think. Artists are very friendly, very open, and I believe for the most part they're definitely willing to help other artists. They know the plight of an artist, and they really want to help people. So ask around, get a feel for your market, and make sure you pick the right festivals. Nobody wants to sit at a festival and sell nothing. One additional point on your customers. You may play a 2-day show. One day you may sell a bunch of stuff. The next day you may sell nothing. Well, why? And then you have to ask yourself, is my buyer at this festival the second day when I sold almost nothing? And the answer is probably no. They were there the first day, which is why you sold anything. So my suggestion is try to bring a little of both, a little higher end, a little not so high end, to see if you can make some sales, make your rent. So a lot of things need to be taken into consideration. I hope that I have covered a lot of this in this video, and do ask questions in the comments if you have any. I'm not the only one interested in the answers or questions to how do you sell. Leave it in the comment below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.